Good morning. Welcome to the Subcommittee on K-12, Higher Ed, and CIP Joint Subcommittee. We're glad you're all here, and I'm going to ask the Secretary to please call the roll.
Assemblywoman Benitez-Thompson. Assemblywoman Carlton.
Here.
Assemblyman Frierson.
Here.
Assemblywoman Gorlow.
Here.
Assemblyman Hafen.
Here.
Assemblywoman Howdegi.
Here.
Assemblyman Levitt.
Here.
Assemblyman Roberts.
Here.
Senator Cannizzaro.
Here.
Senator Kekeffer.
Here.
Senator Ratty.
Here.
Senator Severs-Ganser.
Here.
Chair Dondero Loop.
Here. Thank you very much. Welcome to all of you, and I would remind the public there are several ways to join our meetings, all listed on the legislative website via Nellis, and we welcome your opinions. This morning, the subcommittee will hear a presentation from the Department of Education on 5 budget accounts, and I would like to welcome Superintendent Ebert and Deputy Superintendent Hartz to the subcommittee and invite them to begin their presentation when they are ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of Senate Committee of Finance and Assembly Committee of Ways and Means. Good morning. My name is Joan Ebert. I'm the State Superintendent of Public Instruction and glad to be here with you. As you are well aware, our mission is to improve student achievement and educator effectiveness by ensuring opportunities, facilitating learning, and promoting excellence. We ground all of our work in our 6 values, the cornerstone of that work being equity. Our equity work is not succinct and complete without the other components, and that is our access to quality, success, inclusivity, community, and transparency. All of this was informed by our statewide listening tour, and all of the work that you're going to be presented with today is in alignment with our 6 goals of our STIP. And when we say all children, we mean every single child in our state, which the total is nearly 500,000. So with that as our grounding and how we move forward in the State Department of Education and presenting to you the work that my wonderful team here at the department has done over the years in collaboration with many others across the state. We have 5 budgets that we're going to be talking about today. And with that, I am going to turn the time over to the amazing Deputy Superintendent Heidi Hartz.
Good morning. For the record, I am Heidi Hartz, and I serve as the Deputy Superintendent for Business and Support Services here at the Nevada Department of Education. The first budget account included on today's agenda is Budget Account 2697, which is our Assessments and Accountability Budget Account. This account includes funding for the assessments that are required both by statute and the U.S. Department of Education, as well as supports costs related to the Council to establish academic standards for public schools and to maintain the student accountability information, which is utilized in the Nevada report card. The governor's recommended budget includes 2 significant enhancements in this budget account. The first is Decision Unit E275, which restores funding for the MAP assessment. The restoration totals approximately $1 million in each year of the biennium. This reduction was previously approved during the 31st special session in order to help the state meet its budgetary reduction targets, and due to the fact that the U.S. Department of Education had waived the spring 2020 assessments for all states, including Nevada. I would note that the department, with the support of the governor's office, wishes to continue to utilize the MAP assessments because it provides critical data that assess the abilities and the knowledge of our students, particularly in the areas of early literacy, targeting grades K through 3. This assessment also provides educators with tools to help them determine the strengths of their students and to set goals for their instruction. And it helps educators communicate important milestones, specifically around literacy proficiency, to parents and families so that they can continue to work with their students both inside and outside the classroom to support student growth and literacy. The second decision unit is E277, which recommends the restoration of funding for the Academic Standards Council, totaling $1,057 in each year of the biennium. Funding to support this council was reduced during the 31st special session, and I would note during the 2019 legislative session, funding was previously approved by the legislature at $5,943 per fiscal year. The department believes that they can continue to support the Academic Standards Council with reduced funding based on the gains experienced during the COVID-19 pandemic with meeting virtually and looking for always efficiencies in the way that we do business. Do you wish to address questions at the end of each budget account or at the end of the presentation? I'm sorry, I should have asked at the beginning.
That's all right. That's all right. Director Hartz, I think that we'll stop after each one because some of them have some different pieces to them. And so we'll allow members to ask, and I appreciate that information. And members, just as a reminder, you can either go into the Teams chat or you can wave your hand at me, which sometimes works better. So anyway, anyone have questions on this particular? Senator Ratty, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm curious specifically about this account. What would it look like if how would the administration of these measures of academic progress assessments change in this upcoming biennium if the Read by Grade 3 program funding is transferred into the pupil-centered funding plan? I think they're connected.
Heidi Hartz for the record. So the measures of assessment continue to provide critical information, not only to the Department of Education, but also to each of our school districts and our public charter schools so that they can monitor and track the progress of their students. We would note that while the Read by Grade 3 grant program funding is recommended for transfer ultimately into budget account 2609, the state education funding account, the requirements in statute to continue to ensure that our students attain a level of literacy by the end of grade 3 will remain in place. The only thing that will change is the mechanism by which funding is allocated to school districts and charter schools.
Okay. So then I think if I'm following, and I'm a little new to this area and a new member to this committee, so if I'm not tracking, help me out. So then if the school districts and the charter schools choose to allocate that base per pupil funding in another way, how do we assure that this work still gets done?
Heidi Hartz for the record. I would note that additional information to address your question in more detail will be available when we get to budget account 2713 later in this morning's presentation. But I would note that currently in statute in NRS 387.157, there are requirements for boards of school districts and charter schools to prepare a plan to improve the literacy of their pupils in an elementary school. Additionally, in section 388.159, there are requirements that each principal of an elementary school must designate a licensed teacher to serve as a literacy specialist. So those requirements in statute do not change because the distribution of funding to school districts will change through the implementation of the pupil-centered funding plan.
And then just to follow that literacy specialist would be charged with making sure that the measures of academic progress assessments are executed, implemented.
Heidi Hartz for the record. NRS 388.159 does identify the responsibilities of the leading specialist, literacy specialist at each elementary school. And so they would be responsible for identifying and working within their schools, in their school districts, to ensure that teachers have access to information, including professional development, to support literacy strategies and positive outcomes.
Okay, I think that gets me there, Chair.
Thank you very much. Senator Severs-Gansert, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm kind of following up on the same line of questions. I remember during our preview of the budget, we had information that basically said our fourth grade students for the first time have been in line with their peers across the nation as far as reading goes. And this Read by 3 program is one of the big pieces I think that's made a difference. And the concern of, and I also know it was money that was set aside because then it was actually, its effectiveness was analyzed separately. Is this tool, this measures of academic progress, the only tool, or is there another tool? Because I remember seeing a report that was really tracking how the students were doing in each school district on a relative basis to see if there was growth in learning and proficiency and gains in proficiency in reading. So is this the same instrument that's been used, or did we also have an external contractor who was looking at this program?
Thank you, Senator. For the record, Joan Ebert, State Superintendent of Public Instruction. So the Read by Grade 3 program does have the requirement for the assessment, and we do use as a state the maps for grades K, 1, 2, and 3. We also have SBAC required by the federal government at grade 3. What maybe you are noting is the requirements for an evaluation of the entire program that we have had since its inception. So that is an outside contractor in the past that we have used to measure the success of the Read by Grade 3 program.
Thank you. And it's my understanding, and basically the results have shown that this has been very beneficial for our students. And when you think about the ability to read, it's key to everything that you do in your life. So I'm just wary about putting this in the big bucket with everything else and not tracking it and making sure, even though the requirements are still there in statute, I understand that. So we're supposed to still work on this. We're still supposed to still have literacy experts, but concerned about the money sort of being used for other purposes and not so highly focused on this. So thank you for the review of the different assessments. And again, to note, when we had our preview of the budget, our fourth graders, for the first time ever, I think it was the NAEPS exam, were in line with their peers across the nation for reading. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. Just as a note, I think I missed, and I'm sure the secretary got it, but I want to make sure that they note that Assemblywoman Teresa Benitez Thompson is absent for the day, excused and absent, so thank you. I have a question. Can you talk a little bit about the end of course exams and tell us if there's a replacement in mind or what will happen with these?
Thank you, Chair Dondero Loop. Joan Ebert for the record. In our Senate Bill 76 we have proposed the elimination of the end of course exams. We felt that the college and career assessment that we use that was required by the federal government or the state of Nevada, it is the ACT, meets those needs. And so we worked with the school districts, the superintendents, as well as the testing directors, and made the determination that the assessment that we currently use, ACT, measures student progress. And so we do not need to have additional assessments via the end of course exams.
Appreciate that information. Any additional questions from the committee? Not seeing any. We can move to budget account 2705, please.
For the record, Heidi Hartz. Budget account 2705 is our Educator Licensure account. We're waiting for our slides to come back up. I'm going to go ahead and continue. This budget account supports activities in our Office of Educator Licensure and would include such things as fingerprint and background checks of those seeking licensure within the state of Nevada, as well as investigating complaints of misconduct, and then mandated tracking and reporting of disciplinary processes to the State Board of Education. Funding in this budget account also supports the Commission on Professional Standards in Education. I would note for the benefit of the committee that this is a fee-funded budget account. There are no general fund revenues included in this budget account. I know when we review fee-funded budget accounts, one of the items of concern is always the amount of funding that is maintained in the reserve. I want to share with the members of the committee that at the end of the upcoming biennium, we anticipate that there will be a reserve of approximately $1.3 million, and this is with intent. We do believe that we will need to update or renew our OPAL licensure system because it's approaching the end of its projected service contract. Based on information gathered during the last time this licensing system was considered through the solicitation process, it appeared that replacement would cost approximately $1 million. So within this budget account, the department is working to set aside these funds so that that investment can be made at the appropriate time with no additional resources. There are several major decision units included in this budget account, and they all pertain to personnel. The first decision unit I'd like to highlight is the E900 decision unit, which transfers one education program's professional position and the related operating costs from budget account 2616, Educator Effectiveness, into this budget account. This transfer is recommended because the duties of this position are focused on the licensure continuum. Once the position is transferred into this budget account, then it's recommended that the funding sources for the position be changed, and that's reflected in decision unit E500, which proposes changing the funding of the position from a 50-50 split between general fund revenue and grant funds to 100% fee funded. Again, this budget account has no general fund included in the budget account. I would note that the duties of this position are not intended to change in any way as a result of this transfer. This transfer simply allows the position to be aligned within the budget account and the work unit that best mirrors the focus of the position and its intent. The governor has also included in his recommended budget the reclassification of 2 existing positions. These are reflected in decision unit E805. The first position recommended for reclassification is an existing program officer 3, which is recommended to be reclassified as a chief compliance investigator. The second position is the reclassification of an administrative assistant to a compliance investigator. I would note that the reclassification of the program officer position does not result in any additional costs to the state. There would be a slight increase in general fund to support the reclassification of the administrative assistant, totaling approximately $4,000 in each year of the upcoming biennium. I would note that the request to upgrade or to reclassify these positions is to create more capacity within the position type to better support the mission of the staff who work within this budget account. By reclassifying the administrative assistant position, this would allow the position to have more independent ability to conduct background investigations and community outreach, because there's a greater level of independent decision-making authority associated with that position type. With that, we'd be happy to answer questions on this budget account.
Thank you very much. I believe we have questions from Assemblywoman Haddocky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And my questions are on the reclassification of the administrative assistant. You mentioned a little bit about how the reclassification would provide more independence and allow you to do more community outreach, but can you walk me through how this is actually going to improve the daily activities of the background investigations unit?
Heidi Hartz for the record. The majority of the work allocated to this position is focused on background investigations and community outreach. And so this reclassification would support the workload and then to allow the position to focus more of their time and effort on the background investigations. I would note that this budget account currently has 6 administrative assistant 2s and 1 administrative assistant 3. So reclassifying this one position would allow this position to more actively engage in the background review process and expedite the licensing processes for our educators.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Follow up?
Please go ahead.
And so would this position only participate specifically in SafeVoice investigations?
Heidi Hartz for the record. I believe a portion of the responsibilities for both of the positions included in this decision unit are allocated to SafeVoice activities. And that is a way of sharing capacity across the department. SafeVoice as a program doesn't have investigative staff to investigate and consider any complaints that are received with specific in reference to educators. So these 2 positions would have the capacity to conduct that investigation if necessary in support of SafeVoice.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I believe Chair Carlton has some questions. Please go ahead.
And thank you. So I'm looking at the number of completed background investigations in the last couple of years, and knowing that these positions do the background on applicants for actual licensure, but they also review the criminal histories on the unlicensed charter school employees. So when I look at the number of investigations, it's just one lump sum. Could you tell me how many were actually for licensure and how many were for the unlicensed charter school employees?
Heidi Hartz for the record. I don't believe that we have that information readily available for you today, but we would be happy to follow up with your staff.
Okay. And then I noticed the projections. So if you don't have exact numbers, well, how about if you just give me a ballpark of, is it 50-50? Is it 60-40? Where does the workload kind of lie when it comes to actually doing the licensed personnel versus the unlicensed personnel? Can you just give me a general idea?
Thank you, Chair Carlton. For the record, Superintendent Ebert, I am looking to see if Deputy Gonzalez is on the line and can assist with those specifics.
And Madam Chair, if I could, I know sometimes we ask questions that are kind of from left field, and I always appreciate that they need to go find the information. But unfortunately, by the time we get the response and it's buried in a 20, 30 pages worth of document, it's hard to find it. So if somebody could possibly just come up with an approximate, maybe by the end of the meeting, I would really appreciate understanding where the workload really lies when it comes to doing these, because it's criminal histories that they're investigating. So I'd like to know how many we're doing. So thank you very much, Madam Chair.
You are very, yes, go ahead, please.
We do have Deputy Gonzalez who can provide a response.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, Deputy Gonzalez.
Deputy Felicia Gonzalez for the record. Thank you for the question. I am following up with my staff currently, and we will have a better ballpark answer for you, Assemblywoman Carlton, in just a short while.
That's great. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. And please let us know when you have that information. I appreciate you jumping in there. Additional questions from the committee? So I would just follow up, really not with a question, but just how important this is that we have these background checks, in my opinion, and do this information. It's not easy to do the licensing, and we have several things that people need to do, and we have our children at stake. So thank you very much for doing this and for giving us that information. All right, if we could move forward to budget account 2612, please go ahead when you're ready.
Heidi Hartz for the record. The next budget account on today's agenda is budget account 2612, which is our Educator Effectiveness budget account. It funds services and activities intended to ensure that all students have access to effective, high quality, and experienced educators, to provide resources necessary to attract, prepare, train, recruit, develop, and retain principals, teachers, and other school leaders. In the budget account 2615, we have Enhancement Decision Unit E275, which recommends to increase federally funded travel related to teacher quality leadership activities totaling $2,800 per fiscal year. I would note that this would include in-state and out-of-state travel for school district staff, representatives, as well as staff from the Department of Education. The in-state travel is intended to support professional learning and development initiatives that would benefit school leaders. And then out-of-state travel would allow staff or representatives of school districts to participate in the National Federal Titles Conference, which provides an opportunity for staff to gain information on the emerging expectations or lessons learned that are available through participation in these federal conferences. Also in this budget account, we have Decision Unit E900, which we previously discussed in budget account 2705, which is the transfer of one education program's professional into the budget account 2705 and out of this budget account based on the duties. And with that, we'd be happy to answer questions regarding this budget account.
Thank you very much. And I'm sorry, Director Hartz, if I misunderstood you, but I think we were on 2612 and I thought I heard you say 2615, and I just wanted to make sure that we were on the same page here.
Heidi Hartz for the record. So we were presenting on budget account 2612.
Thank you.
The last decision unit that I presented on was the E900, which transferred a position out of this budget account and back into budget account 2705.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that clarification. Questions from the committee? Assemblyman Roberts, are you moving your hand or are you okay? All right, and not seeing any, I'll go ahead and ask you a couple that I have. So what percentage of this position's time is spent in support of state programs such as the Teach Nevada Scholarship or the Teacher Incentives Program?
Heidi Hartz for the record. Madam Chair, I would need to pull the work performance standards for this position in order to identify if specific allocations are included.
I thank you very much, and I appreciate that information. So just following up on that, since this position supports state programs, Would you give me and the committee a little more information about why that position should be funded entirely with reserves in the licensure budget, which is funded with educator licensure fees?
Heidi Hartz for the record. As we discussed in budget account 2705 earlier today, the recommendation to modify the allocation of funding for this position is tied to its being transferred into a budget account that is entirely fee funded. And because the workload of this position correlates to the educator licensure continuum, it was believed that the transfer of this position into that budget account better align the position with the work that it does to support the licensure and ongoing needs of our educators.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. All right, if I see no more questions, we will move to budget 2721, please. Go ahead when you're ready.
Heidi Hartz for the record. Budget account 2721 is our safe and respectful learning account. This account supports activities that establish training programs to prevent, identify, and report incidents of bullying or cyberbullying. Also to support activities that monitor reports of incidents of bullying and cyberbullying, as well as compliance and support for school districts with respect to applicable school and student safety laws. The governor's recommended budget includes Decision Unit E275, which is an enhancement to support the ongoing provision of services for SafeVoice, which is our 24/7 tip line that has up to this point been supported through a private grant and paid by a third-party vendor. That grant that we have with the Pacific Institute for Research and Evaluation, or PIRE, will expire on December 31st, 2021. So the recommendation is to establish funding moving into the fiscal year 23 to ensure continuity of services. I would note that the Department of Education has submitted a request to the Governor's Finance Office to consider an amendment to this decision unit in reviewing the cost estimate provided by the vendor, as well as the end date on which PIRE will stop paying for SafeVoice on behalf of the state of Nevada. It appears that we would need additional funds beginning in January of 2022. And then in fiscal year 2023, we would need approximately $4,000 of additional funds because there's a 3% increase on the cost of the annual licensure agreement in each calendar year. So to summarize, the amendment that we've requested from the Governor's Finance Office and is still pending their consideration would be for an additional $63,654 in fiscal year 2022 and an additional $4,218 in fiscal year 2023. The next slide, slide number 16, provides some information on the number of tips that have been received by SafeVoice and Handle with Care since January 1st of 2018. Since that time, the total number of tips received is 19,409. The left side of this slide summarizes some of the more common tips that have been received. I would note that previously, the most common tip received has pertained to bullying. However, during the COVID-19 pandemic, the most common tip has become focused on suicidal threats. On slide 17, there is a decision unit included in the governor's recommended budget, E276, which would restore funding for our bullying prevention training and materials, totaling $20,322 in each year of the biennium. This would restore $15,000 for competitive grants and approximately $5,000 for for materials specific to bullying prevention. These funds were previously reduced during the 31st special session. Slide 18 includes several decision units that identify federal grants that will expire in fiscal year 2022. That would include decision unit E490, which notes the expiration of the student threat grant on October 1st of 2021. Decision unit E491 indicates that the student mental health training grant will expire also on October 1st of 2021. And decision unit E492, the Pacific Institute for Research and Evaluation grant, will expire on December 31st of 2021. And that concludes the slides that we have for this budget account.
Thank you very much. I believe Senator Ratty had a question.
Thank you, Chair. So, first of all, I haven't said Senator Debbie Smith's name in a while, and it's been 5 years, and I'm going to pause for a minute and thank Senator Smith for the groundbreaking work and I know she worked with a lot of other people, but for laying the ground on some of this wonderful bullying work. And it's astounding to see the numbers that are coming through this program. I'm also just super grateful that even with the termination of the grant that the governor's prioritizing this and putting it in the budget. I just think clearly during the pandemic, it's a critical program. And so I'm just grateful to see it there. I guess my question is what process did you go through to explore other funding sources around, instead of general fund? Did you apply for other grants? Did we know this was coming? Like, what have we been doing to try to figure out how to make sure that we have funding for this?
Heidi Hartz, for the record. The staff in our office in this office are particularly innovative and active in applying for federal grants. Due to the importance of maintaining the SafeVoice system to ensure that we have continuous services available to our students, to their families, and to educators, the request was put forward that general funds be allocated specifically for this purpose, understanding that there is certainly uncertainty about what federal funds may be available to support this type of activity as we move into the future. And we did not want this program to potentially be unfunded if additional or applicable federal grants did not become available.
And thank you for putting the details of the amendment on the record as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I believe Assemblywoman Hadagi, did you have a question? Or
No,
you...
Madam. I believe Assemblymember Gorlow did.
Okay, thank you very much for the clarification. Assemblywoman Gorlow, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I was looking at slide 16 with the SafeVoice and Handle with Care, all the tips, and noticed that the actual largest is under other with over 5,400 tips. Could you elaborate a little bit about what those other tips might be?
Heidi Hartz, for the record. There are 23 different types of categories of tips that are tracked for SafeVoice and Handle with Care. And so the other category would represent tips that do not fall within those 23 categories. And that could be something such as there's a dog that's crossing the street outside of a crosswalk. Before folks say, well, that's really an extreme example, our program staff are saying that is indeed a tip that they have received previously.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate you clarifying a little bit what those others were, because I was curious if maybe taking some of those other tips and teasing them out, but those truly are other tips. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And I have a follow-up to that comment. I noticed on that chart that it said school employee complaint. are those complaints against, like a teacher against a principal, a teacher against an aide, against a teacher? Are those staff and professional complaints, or are those student and adult complaints?
Heidi Hartz, for the record. I'm told that those would be complaints from students regarding staff.
Thank you very much. Okay, additional questions?
Yes, Madam Chair. Oh, and I see
Senator
Senator
Gansert,
Stevens Gansert also.
Senator Gansert, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to make a comment and thank the staff from the Office of Safe and Respectful Learning for the work that they're doing on this. And also, again, commend Senator Debbie Smith, because she started this off, and then we were able to follow up with the app and make sure it was text ready. And as we have seen, we've gone from 6,000 tips a year up to, I think it was close to 9,000, and then down a little bit in COVID. But going from bullying being a top issue to suicide tells you how important it is during times like this. So I just want to commend the staff and the folks at the schools, the teams at the schools who help these students. And I'm really grateful for this tool that's very supportive to our students during this time and before as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would add to that, ditto, but also to Superintendent Ebert for continuing with the Safe and Respectful Learning Department that you have. So thank you very much. If I see no more additional comments or questions.
Yes, Madam Chair, if I could go ahead and ask my question now, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. I am sorry, Assemblywoman Chair Carlton. I apologize. Got ahead of myself here. Please go ahead.
No, and it's just want to backtrack to the funding, and it really wasn't really clear to me as far as looking for other funding streams. I know there are a lot of ESSER funds that were out there, and I was just wondering, I think a component of that was mental health and social emotional needs. So I was just wondering why those funds were not being utilized to support this. It seems like it would fit it very nicely. So I was just wondering what the thought process of not using ESSER funds to support this program.
Superintendent Ebert, for the record, thank you for the question, Chair Carlton. As you have noted, ESSER funds are made available for many different purposes, mental health being one of them. We have allocated the funds across the state for many different programs. For example, we have had the resources made available via the learning environment, so the learning management system and all of those other components. But we have identified the use of those funds currently for other projects.
So, Superintendent, there was no consideration of possibly using some of those funds to free up the general fund for other issues, since there are things that you can't use the ESSER funds for.
Heidi Hartz, for the record. I believe the recommendation included in the governor's recommended budget was to begin to transition from federal grant funds into general fund revenues to support this, to support SafeVoice, and to ensure that we had a consistent funding source identified moving forward.
Okay, I understand that, but general funds are so tight right now that it seems as though with the ESSER funds and then possibly other education funds that are going to be coming to the state, that this might have been a good way to help save some general fund, so that something that wouldn't have fit this category, we could have put a little extra money into. So thank you very much. I appreciate the answer.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll do one more pass to see if anyone has any questions that I have missed. Seeing no hands, we will close this discussion and move on to budget account 2713. And please go ahead when you're ready.
Heidi Hartz for the record. The next budget account on the agenda is budget account 2713, which is our literacy programs. This budget account provides resources to administer the state's Read by Grade 3 program and supports literacy and proficiency in language arts, which are key components of educational standards and expectations for all students. Before continuing on with the presentation, I do want to bring to the committee's attention that literacy activities are funded in multiple budget accounts across the department. So the staff and the operating costs for literacy activities are included in this budget account 2713. The assessments that would support literacy activities are funded in budget account 2697, and we discussed that budget account earlier this morning. And then the actual grant funding that is allocated to school districts to support specifically Read by Grade 3, that is titled Read by Grade 3, is funded in budget account 2699, which is the other state education programs. And that budget account is scheduled to be heard by the committee on March 19th. I would also note that we did, at a high level, discuss this budget account previously when budget account 2609 was heard, and that is the state education funding account, because the recommendation is that these grant funds would be allocated through the pupil-centered funding plan as a result of the implementation of the new funding methodology for K-12 education. Within this budget account, we have Decision Unit E600, which eliminates the personnel and operating expenses for literacy programs. This recommended elimination is a mechanical adjustment recommended because the funding for Read by Grade 3 in fiscal year 2021 was recommended for reduction as a part of the 31st special session. Slide 21 provides an overview of the restorations that are included in the governor's recommended budget. So as I mentioned earlier, budget account 2699 includes the state-funded grant program that we refer to as Read by Grade 3. Decision Unit E277 restores that funding. Decision Unit E686 reduces that funding in the next biennium. And then E947 transfers the funding into the state education funding account in support of the pupil-centered funding plan. Because the allocation of funding to support literacy activities has been restored to the governor's recommended budget, then Decision Unit E275 recommends the restoration of the personnel and operating expenses that would support literacy programs for the upcoming biennium. The positions will continue to support literacy and proficiency in English language arts by providing training and technical assistance to educators. As we discussed earlier today when other decision units were being considered in other budget accounts, the statutory provisions specific to literacy do not change because of the implementation of the pupil-centered funding plan or the proposed revision in the way funding would be allocated through the pupil-centered funding plan. Again, principals must still designate a teacher in each elementary school to serve as a literacy specialist. The staff in this budget account would shift their responsibilities from monitoring subgrants for each school district and charter school that would track how the funds allocated for each learning strategist were being invested, and would instead focus on providing technical assistance and professional development to the learning strategists, and also supporting other teachers in grades K through 3 so that they have the resources needed to make sure that our students are still continuing to meet the established literacy and English language arts goals that have been established by the state, and are and supported by the Department of Education. I believe that concludes our slides for this budget account.
Thank you very much. Questions from the committee? Assemblywoman Haragi, did you have a question?
I did, Madam Chair, just one question. And it was regarding the 3 education program professional positions. I know you mentioned that they will continue supporting literacy and the English arts language, but my question is there any anticipated changes in their duties and responsibilities if the funding for the Read by Grade 3 program is transferred to the new state education funding account?
Heidi Hartz for the record. At this point in time, the only contemplated change in their duties is that they would no longer be required to assist with the development and monitoring of subgrant agreements, which is the current vehicle that is used to allocate funding to school districts to support the learning strategist positions.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. And I believe I saw Assemblywoman Gorlow.
Yes, thank you so much, Chair. I had a quick question regarding the school districts and charter schools being able to utilize base per pupil funding from the pupil-centered funding plan. Could you explain a little bit about how the department required funding still be provided for the Read by Grade 3 program, therefore requiring the continuation of these positions?
Heidi Hartz for the record. Currently, during the current biennium, the Department of Education allocated funding to each elementary school based on an average salary amount of approximately $71,000 per learning strategist, with an additional $2,000 allocated for professional development. Those funds were allocated via a subgrant agreement with each school district and charter school. Based on the governor's recommendation to implement the pupil-centered funding plan, as outlined in Senate Bill 543, the state-funded grant program would be included in the allocation that goes to each school district and charter school through the pupil-centered funding plan. School districts would then decide how to allocate the available funds for their district to each school, and schools would then have a responsibility to identify how they would invest their available resources to best meet the needs of their students. I would note that statute does clearly indicate that each elementary school principal must identify a learning strategist. So the requirement to identify a learning strategist to continue to provide technical assistance, professional development, and expertise within the elementary school to ensure that our students can read by the end of grade 3 will remain intact. The only thing that will change is that rather than funding being distributed based on an average salary amount through a subgrant agreement, the funds will be allocated through the statewide base per pupil funding amounts or the adjusted base per pupil funding amounts through the pupil-centered funding plan.
Thank you very much. And quick follow-up, Chair?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. So my understanding that through the pupil-centered funding, it might not be used for the same literary purposes. So how would the workload decrease for the 3 positions in this budget?
Heidi Hartz for the record. The Nevada Department of Education does not believe that the workload will decrease for the 3 positions that are currently included in this budget account. We believe the only change that will occur is that instead of having to allocate a portion of their time each year to developing subgrant agreements, monitoring subgrant agreements, and processing reimbursements to school districts, that time can be reinvested in providing technical assistance and professional development support to the learning strategists, as well as other educators across the state, and to identify best practices, which could help us to even more aggressively advance our efforts in this area.
Thank you very much.
And thank you. Any additional questions from anyone? Senator Sievers-Gansert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I think I understand we've got this new funding formula and the potential to basically put everything in the one bucket, and then there's discretion. I think there's a lot of concern about whether that money will continue to be spent on literacy specialists in the schools. And we've made progress. Again, we finally have results that our fourth graders are meeting their peers across the nation. So I think we need to be sensitive to this change in particular because we're making progress. And I do think that there's a strong partnership. What I'm hearing is a strong partnership between the Nevada Department of Education to make sure that the literacy specialists have the resources they need and they have the training they need to make sure that they have effective literacy frameworks. So we're going to look at this later, but I would hesitate to cut the Department of Education's individuals because they're basically reinforcing and making sure their training's being made available to the literacy specialists at the schools. I also want to make sure we continue the literacy specialists at the schools, not just sort of the funding in the bucket, because again, they may go away. So I think we just really need to pay attention to the risk of weakening this program and the successes that we've laid. Thank you.
Additional comments or questions? Chair Carlton, you disappeared, I thought.
Oh, I'm here.
Oh, okay, I don't see you.
There you go. So, and thank you, Madam Chair. And it isn't on these particular budgets, but the conversation we had earlier about the ESSER 1 money led me to start thinking about the ESSER 2 money, which just went over to the department at the, I believe, the February IFC. So I was just wondering, Superintendent, have you finalized a plan on that money yet? And are you ready to possibly share it with us so that we can kind of get a feel for what's going to be funded out there in the future as the ESSER 2 money gets distributed?
Thank you, Chair Carlton. Superintendent Ebert, for the record, we are in the process of finalizing that plan for those funds that were just approved by IFC. Thank you.
Okay, look forward to, having a conversation about that, about where those dollars are going to be going. I know that's, we all want to look for sustainable funding, but we're in a very unique position to where we feel like we need to get through the next 18 to 24 months for things to stabilize. So the more we can accomplish with those federal dollars and being able to free up general fund dollars to address other issues that did not receive federal support, and we don't know if they ever will in the future, would make it a lot easier for us to have these conversations about where the dollars need to go. It's very tough decisions this session, and we just want to be aware of how dollars are actually being spent. So thank you very much. I appreciate the answer.
Thank you very much. One more pass to see if anybody has any questions. Not seeing any hands, then we'll close this budget and we'll thank the Department of Education for your time. And
Madam Chair, if they don't have the answer, if I could get it in either an email or a phone call, and I'll be happy to share it with the committee, but I really don't want it to be in a written memo that I receive 2 weeks from now. So the answer as far as the licensure question, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
that is very good. Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Carlton. And any final comments from the Department of Education before we close out?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We will provide Chair Carlton and the committee with the response to that question she had asked. And then also to, I thank all of you, as always, for your time and asking the great questions that you do so that we are transparent with our work and how we're providing services across the state.
Thank you very much, Superintendent, and thank you to you and your team for preparing these today and for your time and expertise and taking care of the children in the state of Nevada. So we will close out the budget hearing. And I will ask BPS to open the public comment line, please.
Thank you, Chair. Caller with the last 3 digits, 577. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning. Chris Daly, D-A-L-Y, Nevada State Education Association, the voice of Nevada educators for over 120 years. NSEA takes particular interest in Budget 2697, ND's budget on assessments and accountability. We believe the legislature has an opportunity to continue to streamline student assessments and achieve savings in this budget. This session, NSEA has spoken in support of SB 83, authorizing the department to temporarily waive or pause mandated student assessments. We believe Nevada should formally ask the U.S. Department of Education to reconsider their decision not to offer waivers from testing requirements this school year. High-stakes standardized tests administered during the global health crisis should not determine a student's future, evaluate educators, or punish schools, nor should they come at the expense of precious learning time students could be spending with their educators. Over-testing has been a long-standing concern of classroom educators, as decades of standardized tests have shifted the focus in education away from student learning toward a culture of high-stakes testing. Over the last 2 sessions, NSE has worked to reduce the burden of standardized testing on our students and educators. This included helping to pass the 2017 bill from former Senator Woodhouse to audit and streamline the amount of time and resources spent on state tests. While small changes have been made over the last several years, the current crisis calls for a more substantive overhaul of state testing requirements. Even without a pause on the federally mandated tests, a waiver is available to suspend the related high-stakes mechanisms, extend testing times, and even test fewer students. We believe Nevada should exercise this waiver and test the minimum number of students allowable. This will reduce the burden of testing in these difficult times and should achieve the savings in the budget on assessments and accountability in the upcoming biennium. Thank you.
Thank you very
Caller
much.
with the last, oh, I'm so sorry. Excuse me, Senator. Caller with the last 3 digits, 120. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin now. Caller with the last 3 digits, 120. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Stephen Cohen for the record. Stephen with a V, Cohen as in the Assemblywoman. I want to focus this morning on budget account 2721 to ensure that the training amendment that I helped write in 17 concerning training for concerning students with disabilities receives the maximum investment possible, while at the same time ensuring that students and their families who would be affected by the training, both with and without disabilities, have a seat at the table in developing the curriculum. As Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month began the other day, and then today happens to also be Spread the Word to End the Word Day, which is a collaboration between an international nonprofit that has a presence here and a collaborative nonprofit. Kind of the message is be kind to others, because by not doing so, it can affect the student for the remainder of their lives. And with that, Madam Chair, thank you, and I yield.
Thank you.
Chair, the public line is open and working. There are no additional callers at this time.
All righty, we will wait just a minute to make sure nobody else joins us before we close out.
Certainly, Chair. Thank you so much. Broadcast standing by.
broadcast. Do we have any additional callers?
Thank you, Chair. The public line is open and working, and there are no additional callers at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that, and I appreciate those who have called in. Thank you very much to the State Department of Education. We appreciate your time and expertise. Committee members, thank you again for attending, and thank you for your good questions. And we will adjourn this meeting, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you very much, and have a good day. Meeting is adjourned.